All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope everyone is enjoying their weekend. For today's weekly focus list, we got a pretty decent list of names. Now that we're kind of through the major tech earnings and FOMC last week, right? Last week was just stacked week in terms of key economic events. So this week pretty light in that sense, and a couple things to keep on watch, which we'll cover in a second. But overall, I do think we have a handful of pretty quality setups. So let's jump right into it. Let's take a look here at the economic calendar. There we go. All right, so for the week ahead, right, Monday the 6th to Friday the 10th, not too much to really worry about. On Monday and Tuesday, we do have Powell there on Wednesday. And then we have, right, wholesale inventories at about 30 minutes into the open. Right, Powell comes on 15 minutes before they open, and then Powell comes on, or sorry, excuse me, Barr comes on at 2 o'clock. So definitely going to pay attention to what Powell has to say. About 15 minutes into the market open, we'll see what kind of momentum we get or volatility. And then again, Powell speaks on Thursday at 2 p.m. after jobless claims right in the morning. So again, not a ton of data that we have to pay attention to, but jobless claims definitely will be something to keep an eye on. Wholesale inventories, as well as Powell speaking on Wednesday and on Thursday. But for the most part, pretty light week in terms of economic data. Alrighty, so let's get into the weekly focus list for the week ahead. First name that we have here is AMD, and AMD's definitely going to be one of my favorites for this week. AMD here is testing this 112 resistance level, which we really haven't been able to get through since we broke back above back in August. Since then, we've been kind of getting smoked whenever we see a move up into this 112 range. And on Friday, even if we take a look at it intraday, right, we see a break of 112. We end up hitting about 113.50 almost, and then kind of pulled back into 112 right before the close. Right, and we ended up closing on Friday at 112.25, so about 25 cents. So for this week, AMD at 112 is really kind of the main focus for me. It's going to be this 2-point range of 112 to 110 that if we continue to hold, I don't see any reason to really kind of consider a fade. What I would look for a reversal is obviously one SPY in the Qs pulling back from their key resistance ranges, which we'll cover towards the end of the video. So if we see the overall market rate obviously pulling back in AMD, we can see that the pops are getting sold at 112, then we can definitely look for a fade on this name. But since earnings, I definitely do like this for continued upside. I do think it can be a bit choppier as it digests this move. We had one day of digestion on Thursday following the earnings report on Tuesday, and from there we went right. Ended up closing on Thursday at 98, or sorry, Tuesday at 98.50, and then we rallied right all the way up to a high of 113.50. So again, for this week, 112, very, very important level. I do want to see some backtesting of 112, so I want to see multiple price attempts to either break 112 or hold 112 before really making a decision. But looking at the daily, I mean, AMD definitely has room. And I'm targeting about 115 to even 118 on AMD if it can clear this 112 range, right? Really strong volume, holding extremely well, following that day of digestion on Thursday, and we were able to rally and show a lot of relative strength there on Friday. So definitely on watch for continued upside, but we have to hold 112. So again, one of my favorite setups for the week ahead will be AMD. And another one that I'm liking a lot is Tesla. So Tesla on Friday ended up seeing a move back up into this 21 daily EMA, ended up failing and closed right under 220. Okay, so for Tesla, this 220 to 222 range will be key for continued upside. If we fail at 222, we fail to reclaim that, we end up breaking under 220 tomorrow, then I do like puts for a move mainly targeting about 213, 212.50. And then at that area, we can look for a potential bounce. Right? We could see a higher low on the daily and potentially end up bouncing. But yeah, if Tesla does hold 220 and we can clear 222, then that'll be the other area that I'm looking at to go long. Taking a look at the hourly, All right, we can see a really tight consolidation starting at around like 9 o'clock on Friday, where we, every pop into 220 was sold. So if we can get the reclaim of 220 first, end up breaking through 222, ideally we have overall market support or some sort of bullish catalysts on Tesla, then we can look for calls. Okay, should ultimately be able to set up for 230 this week if it can get through 220 and 222. All right. Again, if it fails here, we'll be looking at puts for a fade. All right, so Meta is the next one with an inside day pattern right above this key range of 312 to about 313. Okay, huge spot for Meta. Last time we broke through back in the early October, we ended up going from 312 all the way up into 330. And so really strong move there. Tried to make a higher high, but ultimately failed and did pull back. But really strong, move following earnings. Was able to reclaim 300, hold higher lows, and now we're back above this key area of 312 to 313. So if Meta can continue to hold this range, right, definitely would consider looking for calls. And even on Friday, right, we pushed higher, we pull back into 312, end up holding 312 with a couple of breaks, but we did end up holding, and we were able to rally into the close there. So definitely going to be paying close attention to this name. I would also look at calls over 316 with a risk of 315 if it can clear at 316 and we have overall market support, or again a bullish catalyst on Meta. Right? If it ends up failing at 312 though, then I would look for puts for a move ultimately back down into 308, 307, where I would also consider switching to calls for a potential bounce play in that 1 point range. Okay, so again, as long as we can hold 312, I like it to the upside. 316 would be extra confirmation of a push, and we should ultimately set up for 320 if we can get through that 316 area. All right, so Apple here, I'm looking at this one really over 178.50. Yeah, that is a really important level for Apple. And following earnings, right, we started with a gap down there on Friday, filled this daily gap, and then ended up closing, just slightly under that close from Thursday. But overall, I mean, really strong move. Was able to hold higher lows all day. Just couldn't really quite get up into that close of Thursday, but definitely made an attempt. So for this week, if we can clear 178.50, we should be set up for 180, which is ultimately the main target of upside. So about, about a point and a half. Not huge, but if it can clear 180, I definitely would consider rolling up on it. Looking for a push into 182 to even 183.50. For puts on Apple, if we end up failing at 173.50, which is that low of Friday, then I would consider puts, mainly targeting a move back into 172. And if we fail at 172, I really wouldn't be surprised to see a 170 test before more buyers come into play. So there definitely will be a trade on Apple in this range of 178.50 to 173.50. It's just being patient and waiting for the right momentum. Alrighty, so Microsoft here, really strong move. Last week was able to make higher highs over the earnings move back on October 25th. Okay, and now Meta is trading above this key 352 range where we actually did get a pretty solid close above. 352.80 was that close there on Friday. So with Microsoft for this week, the main area of focus for me will be 352 to 350. If we can hold 352, hold the back test, I think this can set up for a move, really towards that 360 range. All right, 355 will be the first target. We even got close to there on Friday. But if we can get, actually hold 352 here, I do think we set up for about a push up into 360. So we'll be paying close attention to this one. Definitely another favorite of mine. If it does end up failing at 352, we could look for a fade back into 350, and then under 350, we could see a larger pullback. All right. The next one here is DKNG. So I was keeping an eye on this on Friday. Definitely saw it break out over 30, rallied up into this higher high of August 4th, which was the other earnings report. Right, following this earnings, we ended up making a high of 34.50. On Friday, we had earnings and ended up seeing a move, almost into that range for closing at 33.75. Now, DKNG definitely can be tricky to see a day two continuation move, but the main thing that I'm paying really close attention to here is the volume, huge volume on the daily, and we almost get a close at high a day. For a day two continuation play post earnings, the best case scenario that you have on it is a close at the highs. But with this name, really strong move. I mean, it had a 16.5% move on Friday and with a strong close. So if we can get through 34.50, definitely would consider a higher high breakout on this and a day two continuation play with a really tight risk, right? We would risk, about 34.20 there, maybe even 34, but 30 cents for potentially, 1 to 2 points on this. Really, really solid R&R. It's just got to get through that 34.50 mark with momentum and ideally with volume. But usually when you see the kind of volume that we saw with this name on Friday, especially post earnings, you do tend to see a strong continuation. So keep an eye on 34.50 there for that day two move. And again, we have a really tight risk on this position. So if we see, some bullish catalysts on this name, this will definitely be a high quality setup in my opinion. Alrighty, now let's cover SPY and QQQ and wrap things up. So SPY here on the daily, we ended up seeing, we had just an absolute monster move last week from 409.30, all the way up to this high of 436.30. We have about a 6.5% move in a single week. So not one real pullback on the daily. We got back into this range of 436 to 437.20, and 437.20 is the key level to get through for us to see a daily higher high and a larger breakout. If we take a look at the weekly here, we are coming into, another test of this downtrend. You can kind of see it better on the daily. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we're coming into this downtrend again. But 437.20 really is the main level that we have to clear. We tested this back in October. From October 10th to the 17th, we failed here multiple times and then ended up seeing a breakdown where we made the lower low on the daily. And then last week we saw a large bounce. So best case scenario for me this week is we end up testing this 437.20 range. We fail to get through. I mean, so far Friday we saw a pretty decent pullback, and the weakest day out of the whole week, at least in terms of intraday price action. Ended up seeing a move into 436, couldn't get into 437.20, and we saw some sellers come into play. So if we fail to get through 437.20 early on in the week, then I do like SPY for a fade. I like it for a fade back down into this range of 432 to 430, and if we can hold 430, hold the higher low on the daily, then we should be able to see a higher high through that 437.20 mark and a large breakout towards 440 plus. Okay, but early on in the week, I don't want to get overly aggressive to the long side following the 6.5% move on SPY. I would like to look for fade into support and then switch to calls when we back test this key support. Now, if we don't see a pullback, but we can get 1 to 2 days of consolidation, maybe even 3 days of consolidation in this range of 433 to 437.20, then that'll set us up for a healthier move as well. Okay, then we look for a consolidation break and play it that way. So to begin the week, ideally we see the pullback. If we don't, I want to see a couple days of consolidation or above average volume over the 437.20 break to add conviction for a breakout. Okay. QQQ, very similar situation here. And QQQ, it needs to get through 368 to 370 to trigger a larger move, right? QQQ on the weekly, right, it really is kind of an overglorified bull flag. Right? So has to clear 368, 370, right? If we can get through 370 today, we'll break this bull flag and set up for a larger move, ultimately back into that high of like 387. Okay. Now, obviously that would take, multiple weeks to happen, but for this week, yeah, we have to get through 368 to 370. Now, same thing with SPY. If we don't get through this 2-point range, then I would look for a fade. And the area that I would look to fade into would be 362 to 360. If we hold 360, that would be a solid place to add calls into for a move back up into 368 and 374 daily higher high. Okay. If we fail at 360, then it is very likely we see a pullback into 354.20 to even 353.20. And if we hold that area, definitely would consider calls as well. So the main thing for me is just to be patient this week. Last week was a tricky week for me. Had a hard time finding the right momentum and being in the positions at the right time. Mainly was long focused and just ended up mistiming a lot of the moves. So again, for me this week, it's going to be being patient, right? Waiting for that momentum. And last week we saw a lot of moves happen right at the open. This was post earnings. This was also, FOMC, pre FOMC. So we saw a lot of moves happen within the first couple of minutes. And the week prior to that, we didn't see that at all. We saw a lot of consolidation for the first 30 minutes to an hour, and then the real move happened. Okay, last week was very different. We had a lot of the moves breaking out pretty much right at the open. So for this week, I am going to be patient. I'm going to focus on being patient. I'm going to focus on the intraday momentum. I'm going to focus on the higher lows, the price action, right? The lower highs to lower lows, higher lows to higher highs, and focus on the PA. Okay, that's going to be the main focus for me this week. And hopefully we could see the pullback to start the week off and then get aggressive when support is found. All right. Okay. So again, my favorite names for this week: Tesla, Meta, DKNG, and AMD. Definitely the favorites, and I do think we will be able to see some solid movement and some solid price action within the overall market. But again, we'll be patient. Okay, that's huge. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Sunday, and I'll catch you all tomorrow morning with the live trading. Take care, everybody.